Welcome back. This is the part 2 of RBI Bulletin, October 2024.
That makes sense. The more data you have, the better your predictions are going to be.
Right.
But hold on. The article mentions regularization methods and deep learning models.
Yeah.
Those sound pretty technical.
They are.
Can you explain those in a way that even I can understand?
Sure. So imagine you're training a dog.
Okay.
If you only reward it for sitting when you're wearing a blue shirt, it might get confused when you're wearing red.
Yeah, that's true.
So regularization is like teaching the model to recognize the essence of sit,
Okay.
not just specific instances of it.
I see. So it helps the model generalize and make accurate predictions in a wider range of situations.
Exactly.
Okay, what about deep learning?
Deep learning is like giving the model a much more powerful brain to work with. It allows it to handle huge amounts of data and uncover complex relationships that traditional models might miss.
So it's like upgrading from a basic calculator to a supercomputer.
Exactly.
And the study found that using these methods really did improve the accuracy of the food inflation nowcasts. They even advocate for an ensemble approach.
Right.
Where you combine predictions from multiple models to get even better results.
Yeah, it's kind of like the wisdom of the crowds applied to economic forecasting.
Interesting.
Combining different perspectives can lead to much more accurate predictions.
So it seems like machine learning is becoming an incredibly powerful tool
It is.
for economists.
Yeah.
All right, before we wrap up this first part of our deep dive,
Okay.
let's just briefly touch on the last two articles from the RBI Bulletin.
Okay.
We've got cash usage indicator for India and new digital economy and the paradox of productivity.
Right.
I'm particularly intrigued by that last one, paradox of productivity.
Yeah.
It seems counterintuitive.
Yeah.
You think with all the advancements in digital technology, our productivity would be skyrocketing.
Yeah, you would think.
But that's not always the case.
Right.
And this article explores why.
It does.
But we'll delve deeper into that in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay. Sounds good.
Stay tuned, listeners, as we continue our exploration of the Indian economy and unpack these last two thought-provoking articles from the RBI Bulletin.
All right.
We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back. Before the break, we were about to dive into the last two articles from the RBI Bulletin.
Right.
First up, cash usage indicator for India.
Okay.
It's funny, we talk so much about the rise of digital payments,
Yeah.
but cash is still such a big part of daily life for a lot of people, especially here in India. And I have to admit, I'm really curious how economists actually measure something as fluid and untraceable as cash.
Right. It's a real challenge. Unlike digital transactions, which leave a clear electronic trail, cash is largely anonymous, which makes it really difficult to track how much is actually circulating and how people are using it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's where this cash usage indicator comes. And this article proposes a new way to measure cash usage in India,
Okay.
taking into account all these different factors to get a more accurate picture.
So it's like a secret decoder ring for cash transactions.
You could say that, and it could be really valuable for policymakers.
Okay.
Giving them a better understanding of the trends in cash usage, and that can help them design better policies.
Right. So even in our increasingly digital world, understanding cash flow is still really important.
It is.
Okay, let's shift gears now and delve into that productivity paradox you mentioned earlier.
All right.
New digital economy and the paradox of productivity.
It's a fascinating one.
It is. It's a bit of a head scratcher.
Yeah.
You would think that with more technology, you would automatically be more efficient and see more economic growth.
Right.
But it seems like the reality is a little bit more complicated.
Yeah, it is. This article examines this phenomenon, in the Indian context.
Okay.
And it's not just India. We see this trend of slowing productivity growth despite all these technological advances in lots of developed economies as well.
Huh, interesting.
Yeah, economists even have a name for it, the Solow productivity paradox.
Okay.
After the Nobel laureate, Robert Solow, who famously said, you can see the computer age everywhere, but in the productivity statistics.
So we've got all these amazing gadgets and software, but they're not necessarily translating into the economic gains we might expect.
Yeah, that's the question.
That's the disconnect there.
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
So the article looks at what's happening in India, but it's actually quite revealing.
Okay.
First, it highlights the fact that the information and communication technology sector, or ICT sector, has been a major driver of India's overall output growth.
Okay, so that sector is booming.
It is. And in fact, its contribution has been increasing over time from about 5% in the 1980s to over 13% in recent years.
Wow, so the digital sector itself is creating a lot of economic value.
It really is. And on average, the ICT sector's productivity has been much higher than the non-ICP sector.
Okay.
So it seems like digitalization is leading to productivity gains, at least within that specific sector.
Right, but then where's the paradox?
Right. That's the question.
Is it just that the benefits haven't spread to other sectors yet, or what?
That's one possibility. The article points out that this productivity impact of ICT was most pronounced from 1980 to 2000.
Okay.
During that time, India didn't really experience this Salo paradox.
Interesting.
But things kind of shifted in the post-global financial crisis period.
So this is a more recent phenomenon.
It seems so. We see the similar trend of slowing productivity growth in India despite increased digitalization, after the global financial crisis, which is what's happening globally as well.
So it's like the initial wave of digitalization brought these big productivity gains.
Right.
But then those gains kind of plateaued in recent years. I wonder why that is. Do we just need to give it more time?
That's a good question.
Or are there some deeper issues at play?
Yeah, there are a lot of theories floating around out there. Some economists believe it just takes time
Okay.
for businesses to fully integrate new technologies and, change their processes to really take advantage of them.
That makes sense.
Others argue that we might be mismeasuring productivity in this digital age.
Oh.
Maybe our traditional ways of calculating productivity don't fully capture the value created by these digital innovations.
Right. Especially in things like software and online services.
Exactly. And then there's the question of whether we're seeing a shift in the types of innovations that are happening.
Yeah.
Are we focusing more on incremental improvements rather than, these groundbreaking discoveries that revolutionize entire industries?
Right.
It's a complex issue.
It is. It really gives you a lot to think about.
It does.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive,
Yeah.
Exploring all these different facets of the Indian economy. But we have one more article to unpack.
Right.
And it's a bit of a brain teaser. New Digital Economy and the Paradox of Productivity.
Yeah.
I mean, the title alone has me intrigued.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems counterintuitive that in this age of incredible technological advancement, we wouldn't be seeing a surge in productivity.
It does, right? You would think with all these amazing tools and automation, we'd be working less and producing more.
Right, exactly.
But as this article explores, it's just not that simple.
Okay, so walk me through this. What exactly is the paradox?
Well, the paradox is basically the observation that even though we have all this digital technology and we're integrating it into all these different sectors, productivity growth just hasn't really kept pace.
Okay.
And this is a global trend, and India is no exception.
So it's not that technology isn't contributing to the economy at all.
Right.
It's more that the gains aren't as widespread or as dramatic as we might expect.
Exactly. It's like we're not seeing the full potential of all this digital innovation.
Okay, so the article dives into the specifics of the Indian experience.
It does.
What did they find?
Well, one of the key things they highlight is that the ICT sector in India has actually been a major driver of economic growth.
Okay, so that sector is doing well.
It is, and its contribution to overall output has actually been steadily increasing over the past few decades.
Interesting.
And on average, the ICT sector actually has higher productivity levels compared to non-ICT sectors.
Okay.
So, digitalization is definitely contributing to productivity gains.
Right, but it seems like those gains aren't trickling down to other sectors as effectively.
Yeah, that's one of the big questions.
And what about this idea that, India didn't really experience this productivity slowdown in the decades leading up to the 2000s,
Right.
but then things changed after the global financial crisis?
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it?
It is.
It's like maybe the initial wave of digitalization brought these huge productivity gains, but then for some reason those gains just kind of plateaued in recent years.
It really makes you wonder if there's some kind of lag effect.
Yeah.
Maybe it takes businesses longer to adapt to these new technologies and figure out how to use them effectively.
That's definitely one possibility.
But the article also explores other potential explanations, right?
It does. There's this idea that maybe we're just not measuring productivity correctly in this digital age.
Okay.
Maybe our traditional methods don't really capture the full value of things like software or online services.
Makes sense.
And then there's the question of whether the types of innovations themselves have changed.
Okay.
Are we seeing, fewer of those groundbreaking inventions?
Right.
and more incremental improvements.
So maybe it's a combination of all these factors.
Yeah, probably.
This whole paradox of productivity is fascinating
It is.
because it really shows us that even in this age of big data and powerful computers,
Right.
the answers aren't always clear-cut.
Nope.
It highlights the need for, ongoing research and analysis as we try to understand how all of these pieces fit together.
Absolutely.
And it reminds us that technology is just one part of this complex equation.
Right.
There's so many other things to consider, like education,
Yeah.
infrastructure, government policies, global market forces. You name it.
It's a whole ecosystem.
It is. So I think we've done a pretty good job today of unpacking some of these issues
I think so.
and giving our listeners a better understanding of what's going on in the Indian economy.
Hopefully.
We've talked about everything from, the global outlook to the rise of AI in banking,
Right.
the performance of MSMEs,
Mm-hmm.
the challenges of measuring cash usage,
Yeah.
and of course, this intriguing paradox of productivity.
It's been a good deep dive.
It has been a really good deep dive. And as always, I want to remind our listeners that if they want to go even deeper,
Yeah.
they can check out the full RBI Bulletin.
It's a great resource.
It is. And hopefully after this deep dive, they'll find it a lot easier to understand.
I hope so.
So as we wrap things up, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought.
Okay.
In all this talk about data and technology and economic indicators,
Right.
it's easy to forget that behind all the numbers
Yeah.
are real people,
Mm-hmm.
workers, consumers, entrepreneurs, families.
Real people trying to make a living.
Exactly.
Mm.
So as we navigate all of these complex economic shifts, it's important to remember the human element.
Absolutely.
What does it all mean for people's lives?
Yeah.
How can we ensure that economic growth translates into, greater well-being and opportunity for everyone?
That's the ultimate goal.
It is. And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the Indian economy. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep asking questions,
Yeah.
keep exploring, and keep jiving deep.
Like and subscribe. Stay tuned, we will back soon with another podcast.